well, welcome everybody. I think I introduced myself to most people. I'm Nina, and we have Heather back here and Molly from Freedom Physical Therapy. And we have JoAnn and Amanda, who will be our other two presenters tonight. So thank you for coming. We've been doing this ladies' night out for many a year. I don't know, 10 years, 8 years, somewhere in there, right, Molly?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really just a night that we do a women's health focus. And we like to bring in different presenters from the area to have a night of education and fun. So make sure that you ask your questions at the end. We're happy to address them, and we'll stick around for a little while after too if you have questions that you'd rather ask one-on-one. Happy to help. Okay. So my challenge is going to be to condense this talk into 20-30 minutes. This is normally a talk that I do in an hour and a half. So I cut out a ton of slides, but I have a lot to say, and I'm very passionate about the bladder. So I might just blah, blah. So you guys give me the wrap it up if I'm going too long, okay? So, as I mentioned, I'm here from Freedom Physical Therapy. I work at this location in Fox Point. And I do women and men's health. So I treat bladder problems, pelvic organ prolapse issues, issues with the GI, diastasis recti, which is an abdominal separation, and this focus is going to be on incontinence. So let's start out by just defining what urinary incontinence is. So urinary incontinence is any involuntary leakage of urine. So anytime you don't want urine to come out and it comes out, that's called incontinence, okay? And we estimate there's about 13 million people in the US who suffer from some type of urinary incontinence. And actually, depending on what you read, it can be as much as up to 50% of the population has urinary incontinence. We know that it's at least 30%, but there's some studies that are estimating it's about 50%, okay? So that's a lot of people. And women are more affected than men, but men certainly have some issues with this as well. Okay, so we're going to start out talking about the bladder anatomy and the pelvic floor anatomy. Okay, so this is a picture of the bladder, which looks kind of like a big water balloon with a straw coming out of it. Okay, so the bladder has a muscle around it called the detrusor muscle. And the urethra, which is the bladder's tunnel to the outside world, is encirculated by this muscle called the pelvic floor, okay? So if we have a big water balloon, being the bladder, and a straw to the outside world, the pelvic floor is acting by squeezing the straw shut, okay? And that's what the role of the pelvic floor muscle is to keep urine in. It also needs to be able to relax to let urine out, okay? So here's another picture of the female pelvis. And this is nice to really get a visual of what the pelvic floor is, okay? So this is a cross section. We just cut right down the center. And here's another picture of our water balloon with a straw to the outside world, bladder and urethra. We have our uterus with our vaginal canal. We have our rectum with our anal canal, okay? And all of those three openings go through this hammock of muscles called the pelvic floor, okay? So this is the only muscle that really is at the base of us. Its job is to hold up everything on top of it, being bladder, uterus, rectum, colon and rectum, and all of the other internal organs. So it has a really big job to hold and support all those things. So here's another picture of the pelvic floor to help you understand why physical therapists got involved in this whole thing called incontinence. And that is because we're trained in the muscle. So we are experts in muscle function. We know how to strengthen it, we know how to stretch it, we know how to mobilize it, we know how to do a lot of things with the muscle. And this is a muscle like every other muscle of your body. It's just very much intimately related to your bladder, your uterus, and your colon. Okay? So this is like you're looking inside of a pelvis, looking straight down at the ground, and you can see the straw opening, the urethra, vaginal opening, and the anal opening here. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so that's kind of how physical therapy got involved in this, is because of the musculature. And physical therapy really is the first line of defense against any type of incontinence, okay? So back when I started doing this about 16, 18 years ago, physical therapy was not the first line of defense. So a lot of times medications were the first line of defense. You'd go and talk to your physician about a type of incontinence that you had, and they would a lot of times give you a pill for that. So now physical therapy is well researched and it's proven to work, okay? So it's something that your physician, if you talk to them, should be offering you physical therapy as part of the solution to your problem. So we're going to talk about now normal bladder function, normal pelvic floor function, and then we'll get into what is abnormal. So normal bladder function, we have about 5 to 7 voids or urinations a day, okay? Our biggest one is in the morning, 8 to 12 ounces, and the rest of the day is about 6 to 10 ounces. Our average time interval between voids is about 2 to 5 hours. So if you're between 20 and 50, your average is about 2 to 4 hours, so you should be able to hold it pretty comfortably. If you're over 50, about 2 hours is normal, 2 to 3. Okay. Nighttime voids, it is normal to use the bathroom if you're under 65, 0 to 1 time per night. And if you're over 65, 1 to 2 is considered normal. I've had patients who have had to use it 7, 8 times a night, so it can be a big issue. Okay. So, we're going to talk now about, if that is not you, that last slide, you might be dealing with some issues here in the land of incontinence. And there are really 3 main types, and a 4th type, which is any combination of the above 3. The 2 most common are stress and urge incontinence. And another one that's a little less common is called overflow incontinence or retention incontinence. Okay, so we're going to start talking about stress urinary incontinence. So stress urinary incontinence is basically the loss of urine with an increase in intra-abdominal pressure. Okay, so that's a lot of words. What that means is, anytime I use my abdomen or my back muscles, so if I'm exercising or if I'm jogging or if I'm getting up from a chair or if I cough, it's a big contraction of my abdominal muscles. That is going to squeeze my bladder. Think about a big water balloon inside of my abdomen. And if these muscles contract, they're going to squish the bladder. Okay, so if that squish happens and urine slips down that straw, without any sort of contraction to hold it in, that's what we call stress incontinence, okay? So it's commonly seen with physical exertion, exercise, coughing, sneezing, quick sudden movements, okay? So if you're walking and oops, I forgot something, and a little urine comes out, that would be stress incontinence, okay? That can be a small amount that you lose or a large amount. So what do we do in physical therapy for stress urinary incontinence, okay? So physical therapy is something that can be really, really helpful in stress urinary incontinence. So the most simple remedy for stress urinary incontinence is simple strengthening exercises called the Kegel exercises, okay? You guys have all heard of that, right? So Dr. Arnold Kegel developed these exercises back in the 30s. They've stood up over time. Now that they've been well researched, we know that they're doing what he thought they would do. Okay, so we strengthen those muscles of your pelvic floor, so it's a stop to the straw. Okay, so we think of the big water balloon that's getting squished when we exercise or cough. Urine comes down that straw, and by strengthening our pelvic floor, we have a tighter hold to keep the urine in. Okay, that's the most simple solution. Well, sometimes that doesn't work. Okay, if that doesn't work, or if somebody's really strong down there, and urine is still coming out, we need to think about what could be some other reasons as to why we're having stress incontinence. So something that I see often, and I see this more kind of in the childbearing years, more my younger moms. I see that strengthening is maybe not the only mode of improvement for these patients. We actually need to work on lengthening of the muscle. Okay, so we may find that in this group of patients that the muscle is kind of living in this not really able to contract very well, not really able to relax very well. It's kind of living in this middle ground. It would be like walking around with your arm in this bicep curl, okay, halfway between a full curl and a relaxation. So I see a lot of times that these young moms, by posture or by birth trauma, are holding some tension in their pelvic floor muscle. So when they do things like they gotta go and grab their 2-year-old, the muscle's not able to get this contraction, this responsive contraction back, kind of like a trampoline. So the trampoline's not able to come down and come up to meet the stress that's going on in the abdomen. Okay? So you need somebody who can problem solve and figure out, are we able to contract the muscle well, or do we need to maybe lengthen the muscle and teach it how to contract and relax well? And that's where a tool called biofeedback can be really helpful. Maybe you guys have heard of biofeedback. It's been around for a long time. Biofeedback is something that we use to help us figure out what is the muscle doing when we're asking it to contract and relax. Because the pelvic floor, it's hard to know. Are you doing a contraction or not doing a contraction? It's not like doing bicep curls where I can watch you and say, great form, that looks good, you're getting full excursion. The pelvic floor is a little bit trickier to get a good visual on. So biofeedback uses little sticky electrodes that you put right on the pelvic floor, and you have a wire that goes into the computer. So I say, go ahead and contract your pelvic floor like you're trying to keep in gas or urine. And we should see it on the computer that, yes, you are doing a great job. We see that there's muscle contracting. Or if we don't see the computer light up, we know that we're doing it incorrectly. So it can be a really nice tool to help us figure out, are we contracting, are we relaxing? It can be a nice strengthening tool, or really nice for that postpartum clientele that maybe has a confused pelvic floor. Other things that can be helpful for stress incontinence is weight loss, okay? I see this a lot, and I saw it a lot over the pandemic, that we started to see more incontinence as people maybe gained a little weight when their gyms were closed or they became more sedentary. Sometimes even just putting on 5, 10, 15 pounds can be a lot more pressure on your bladder, and you may notice that you're having a little more leakage. So we can help construct a program to get a few of those extra pounds off. And the other thing that can be helpful in physical therapy, beyond just doing Kegels, is pressure management. And this is something that's getting a ton of research now. So pressure management, what is that? That is when maybe our posture, the way we move, the way we lift, the way we stand, is putting a lot of pressure on your bladder. And that is creating much more stress on your bladder than somebody else who has better posture, okay? So a really common posture that I see where there's a lot of pressure on your bladder is this rounded posture. So if we're kind of tight in the pecs, maybe have a little roundness in our spine, forward head, this change in position of our upper body pushes a lot more on our bladder than if we were standing with more of a neutral posture. So sometimes somebody comes in and they have stress incontinence and they were doing a bunch of Kegels on their own, not getting better. Well, let's look at their posture, let's look at their spine and see if we can change some little things about the way they're carrying themselves or standing to help reduce the pressure through the bladder. And there are surgical procedures too that can be done if physical therapy does not work. Okay, I should be done pretty soon, right? So, urge incontinence. This is the second most common type, okay? So stress incontinence, urine slips out when we squeeze our bladder. Urge incontinence is different. That's when we have a really strong urge and some urine comes out, okay? It's also termed overactive bladder. You may see some ads for that, okay? do for that? So that's when you're just kind of standing around, or you get up from sitting, and oh my gosh, all of a sudden I just have this really strong urge. I have to run to the bathroom, I can barely make it there, and I may leak on the way, okay? So what do we do in physical therapy for that? Well, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to take a look at what's called a bladder and fluid diary, all right? So when you come in and you tell me that you have these type of symptoms, I'll hand you a bladder diary, and I want to know everything you're drinking, everything that you're urinating out, and if you made it to the toilet or if you didn't make it to the toilet, okay? And we're going to take a look at that and see how we need to maybe modify some of your behaviors. So first thing I'm going to teach you is how to assess if your bladder is really full or not, okay? So if you remember a few slides ago, we talked about it's normal to go about every 2 to 5 hours, okay, depending on your age. It may be more like 2, maybe more like 3, 4, okay? So if somebody comes in and they tell me that they're having all of a sudden a really strong urge, and I look at their diary and we see that, oh, that's happening about every 45 minutes or an hour, really strong urge, have to run to the bathroom. Oh, and in that time I see that you really didn't have much fluid. So that to me is, if you have a really strong urge that just kind of happens out of nowhere, haven't really had much to drink in the last hour, that to me is an irritable bladder, okay? So the bladder is very irritable. It shouldn't act that way. It should kind of slowly fill. We're always aware of how full our bladder is. It shouldn't have a really strong spike and gotta run to the restroom. So we want to look at, why is that bladder irritable? Why is it irritated? Well, it might be what you're drinking in, or taking in for drinks. Maybe you're taking in a lot of bladder irritants, which are caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, carbonation, and maybe not taking in as much water. That's a really common one. If you feel like you have to go to the bathroom all the time, a lot of times people fluid restrict and they don't take in a lot of water. So if we think about our urine, if we have darker urine, it's a little bit more concentrated, pretty yellow, that is super irritating to the lining of the bladder, okay? So the lining of the bladder gets really irritated because it has this really strong concentrated urine in there because we're not taking in enough water, okay? So some things we may recommend is swapping out some of those alcohol or caffeinated drinks with a little extra water, or taking the water in between the cups of coffee to help dilute what's in the bladder. We may need to address some constipation issues. So your bowel and your bladder live right next door to each other. So if we've got stool that's sitting down in the lower rectal canal, that is pushing on the bladder's territory. So our bladder is going to be a little bit more irritated if we have stool that's sitting down there that we're not getting out of our gut on a daily basis. And the only thing I wanted to touch on here is that if physical therapy is not helpful in this, doing physical therapy in the conjunction with medication can be a really great combo. So there are medications called anticholinergics that can be helpful in reducing urges. They used to be given out like candy quite often. Now they're given out for a short period of time and usually in conjunction with physical therapy to help depress the urgency. And also local estrogens. So if you're at that perimenopausal age, having a local estrogen applied to the vaginal canal or sometimes in the vaginal canal can be incredibly helpful for urgency. Okay. The last one that I wanted to touch on here is called overflow incontinence. And overflow is basically retention of urine in your bladder. And I see this one a lot with nurses and with teachers. Okay, so women who could not use the bathroom when they wanted to, and they got used to holding for really long periods of time. And then their bladder became really overstretched, kind of like that overstretched elastic band in your favorite pants, or like an overstretched sweater. So when that becomes overstretched, when we go sit down to urinate, it doesn't contract very well to get all of the urine out. So you've got always like this residual urine sitting in that bladder, because the bladder is not a very good contractor anymore. Okay? So what that looks like is it's a continuous dribbling. We call this one passive incontinence. It just kind of dribbles out of you. You know, you're moving around and, oh, I didn't even feel like I had an urge, or I was just, you know, hardly doing anything. It just kind of came out. Those are things that I would be curious to see if you have some urinary retention. These are some other symptoms you could have. So what do we do for that? Well, we want to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to get that bladder to empty the best that we can, okay? So we want to work on pelvic floor muscle relaxation while you're sitting on the toilet, okay? So sometimes just promoting getting, you know, everything nice and relaxed, perhaps leaning forward a little bit to get a full urination out can be super helpful. A really nice tip that I have is called double voiding. So if you think that maybe this is you and you have some overflow incontinence or some retention issues, or if you had what's called a post-void residual done by a physician, or we do this here too, it's an ultrasound to look to see how much urine actually came out when you thought you emptied. Is there anything sitting in there? If that sounds like you, or if you had that test that was positive, double voiding would be a nice tip to try. So what that is when you sit down to urinate, after you feel like you're done, stand up, shift around, sit back down again and lean forward and take a deep breath. And then see if a little bit more urine comes out, okay? And if more urine comes out on a regular basis, then that would be how you should urinate from here on out, okay? Double voiding might be a really nice thing for you. And if that is not helpful, then pelvic organ prolapse surgery might be something that's helpful to you as well. And mixed incontinence, this is really most of what we see here. It's a combination of those things. So we're helping you kind of tease out where are those symptoms coming from. So what can you do, okay? So kind of a little summary slide. First of all, talk to your physician if you're experiencing leakage. As I said, it is very common, but it is not normal, okay? So sometimes think, oh, everybody has this. My sister has it, my mother had it. Well, it's not something you have to live with. There are solutions, there's a lot of things that we can do to help you improve your symptoms. And first step is talking to your physician and seeing if PT is appropriate. I have a little handout sheet that summarizes a lot of what I said here today called Tips for a Healthy Bladder, and it's right at the front when you exit. Drink some water if you find that you're not drinking enough water, okay? So if you're feeling thirsty right now, you might be a little bit dehydrated, okay? If you're drinking a gallon of water, maybe scale it back a little bit, okay? So somewhere in the middle of not too little and not too much. Keep active and lose the extra weight. That sometimes can just help take care of some of that stress and incontinence. Meditate to reduce your stress hormones. Stress can be a really big reason we have some urgency or some irritation of the bladder. So incorporating some meditation or some yoga into your routine might be really helpful if you have a lot of stress in your life. And Kegel exercises can be super helpful with a lot of these issues. They're certainly not the end-all be-all, but we want to make sure that our pelvic floor is strong. So thank you. A lot of info. Do you want me to take questions, or should we just kind of move on? Or?
Let's do questions now,
No.
and then if you have more specific questions, we can mingle at the end.
Okay. And Amanda, you can get set up if you want to here, because I'm done with my slides. Any questions, or if you have personal questions, I'm happy to answer at the end, or general questions.
I have a question. Or you didn't. I don't think you went over the compression document.
Yeah.
So what is that?
So what that is, that was a tip for decreasing nighttime voids. So sometimes if you're up a lot at night, especially for the person that if you wear, kind of tight socks or something around your ankle and you take your pants off at night and you notice that ridge, that indentation, you might be having some swelling down into your legs. So what happens, if we have swelling in our legs and then we go to bed at night and we're laying flat, that actually starts to circulate that fluid through our circulatory system, kidneys, bladder. So we move a lot of fluid when we lay down at night. So sometimes just elevating your legs like an hour before bed, just start that circulation process, a while before you go to bed can be so helpful. And I've had patients that's all they started doing, and that took care of the nighttime voids. Does that make sense? So, like, if you go to bed at 10:30, around 9:30, put your legs up higher than your heart, not like in a recliner, but, you know, up on the edge of a couch where your ankles are higher than your heart. Stay there for about 15 minutes, and then before bed, just urinate like you normally would, and see if that helps get more fluid out before you go to sleep.
I realize like medications and other things can affect the color of our urine, but like, is there to know you're well hydrated enough, like is there how yellow should my urine be? Like, is there a benchmark for that?
Right, you know, from what I hear, and what I've read, the general recommendation on if you're hydrated enough is if you're thirsty, you know. So, I think, you know, barring there's no medications involved, we are kind of striving for a lightish yellow when you urinate. But, you know, they used to say it's your body weight divided in half in ounces, okay? So if you're 150 pounds, that'd be 75 ounces they recommend, okay? And that's probably a little too broad for people, but it's at least a starting point. So if you're way over that, then maybe tailoring it back, or if you're only drinking a glass or two of water a day and you're 150 pounds, we need to probably up that a bit. No? Okay, well, thank you guys. Thanks for listening.
So next is Amanda Zagrodnik, and she is from Integrative Health and Wellness. I'll let her kind of introduce herself, but just so we know who's coming up next.
Thank you. And this is Harley, my baby. She's just over 2 weeks old. So let's hope she plays along for this. I feel like that was a great presentation for me to follow with personal life right now, but also hearing about the water and your experience and recommendations with that. So without further ado, I am Amanda Zagrodnik. I own Integrative Health and Wellness. I am a nutritionist. So I always like to start presentations by just giving a little bit of a background on me, because nutritionist is a really broad field, and practices vary greatly. So I graduated from UWO, or University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. My undergrad was in kinesiology, which is strength and conditioning. I worked with athletes. And then I went on to earn my master's degree in human nutrition from the University of Bridgeport in Connecticut. And my emphasis in education there was disease management and prevention. And then I've worked as a nutritionist since 2014. I opened my own practice in 2017. And I have offices in Mequon and Waukesha. So then, a little bit about my approach. So I mentioned nutritionists can vary, practice can vary. I am extremely passionate about disease management and prevention, and really just using food to reach your best health. We have to eat every day, right? I hope everyone here eats food every day. And really just using that to either maintain the best health or address any underlying health concerns that you might be dealing with, and looking at what's going into your body and how that can help. So I do take a proactive approach. I want to get to the root of any health issues. So, you know, some common topics: headaches, constipation or bloating, inability to lose weight, inflammation of joints, and the list goes on. So instead of treating each of those symptoms individually, looking at why are these even happening. So if I use headaches, for example, I like to tell my clients all the time, even one headache a week is too many. So if that's something that you're dealing with, something that we tend to do is settle for feeling less than our best. It's about getting to the root of why these things are happening. You really, truly do deserve to feel good in your body every day, even as we age. And how I do that is I work with everyone individually, because we're all different. What works for me as far as food goes is going to be different for each and every person in this room. So understanding your personal health history, something that is unique to you, but also family health history. If you have family history of heart disease or other inflammatory conditions, learning ways that you can use food to help prevent the onset of that for yourself, or again, work through if it's already something that you're dealing with, what your specific goals are, and then I'll talk through some other targeted approaches that can help help you really feel your best, again, using food and understanding your body. So, be well, be well. I like to joke all the time, I am not recreating the wheel. I can't create new foods, so my recommendations as a nutritionist are pretty simple. It's getting back to the basics, getting away from a lot of the standard American diet. If anyone's ever heard that, SAD, sad. We have a very sad diet here in America. I'm glad that's not the first time for some of you to be hearing that, but I focus on the quality of foods and really just, again, getting back to the roots, trying to eat as many whole foods as possible, getting away from processed food-like products, and really identifying what works with your body inflammation-wise, and looking at the nutrient density of the foods. So I also don't have clients count calories or measure macros or anything like that. I actually recommend getting a balance of foods from different food groups so that you're hitting everything that you need, micronutrient-wise, macronutrient-wise. That would be like the carbs and the fats and the proteins that you probably hear about all the time. But getting away from overcomplicating and turning food into a math problem, which is where we really have gotten as a society. There's apps galore. Most women in the room, if anyone here has ever been on a calorie tracking app, most of you have probably been told like that's what is typically thought of when it comes to working with a nutritionist. So that slide that I just had up with the symptom questionnaire goes through all of the different areas and systems of the body. A score of over 50 is not good. That is something that I typically want someone to be doing personalized lab testing of some sort so we can get to the root of why they feel so icky every single day. This client came to us and her initial score was a 93. She was not doing very well. 6 weeks in, that score came down to a 14, just looking through food. Now she did go through like food sensitivity testing. She had a lot of inflammatory issues going on. That, at the end of the day, is the power of food. It's not just losing 10 or 20 pounds on the scale, it's feeling better every single day. But the other thing is you can see that she did lose weight in those 6 weeks, 20 pounds of body fat, and we're able to make sure that you're not losing muscle. And then here are the really big things. Exercising again, cooking, and enjoying cooking. If anyone's not enjoying cooking or not enjoying food, really trying to find a way to make food exciting again. It is something that you should arguably be doing 3 to 5 times a day. And understanding really how to fuel your body, not to deprive your body, but really fuel your body to feel your best every single day. So with that being said, so it can be difficult to remember how good you are truly designed to feel. That is the goal with proper nutrition, to get your body where it should be feeling absolute best every single day. Does anyone have like specific questions about symptom management or any specific areas of conditions or nutrition?
I have a question. So I'm going to be 68, and I'm starting to lose my hair. Now, my mother had thin hair. My dad died in 96. His hair was thin, but it was the same thin it always was. I take 10 milligrams of biotin every day. My nails look great.
Love it.
My hair does not.
Okay.
And it's not alopecia. I've seen the skin there. It's not alopecia. It's just, so now I have to go on and you have to get this different kind of blood work done that he recommended that my endocrinologist ordered.
Okay.
So, do you have any ideas like what, and I eat a pretty anti-inflammatory diet. Do you have any ideas like, have you ever had anybody that has lost It's like strands, not clumps, but strands.
Yeah, it's actually one of the main things that I've been seeing in the last few years, I would say, is hair loss of all ages. And everyone's different. Hair loss is a really hard thing because we've always been told biotin, specific B vitamins to help with that. And there's a lot of things that can be a root cause for the hair loss. So micronutrient imbalance or deficiencies, if you've had any of your vitamins and minerals tested.
We're not doing that yet. I
Okay.
mean, you know, I just think it's at this point, I mean, basically what my dermatologist told me is, you know, first try Rogaine,
Mhm.
which did burn my scalp. Then said, okay, well, try Nutrifol, you know.
Mhm.
But then when I looked it up, I've been a nurse for a long time. I looked up and I thought, I don't really want to do 6,000 international units of vitamin A a day. I
Yeah.
said, because especially the
It's a lot
other
for a
stuff that
fat
have
soluble.
vitamin A in it. So I'm
Mhm.
thinking to myself, that might tip me over the scales of what's safe for vitamin A.
Yeah.
But that's a part of, and Nutrifol is a supplement that has, I'm sure you've heard it,
Yep.
about it. You know, it does have some botanicals in it, as well as biotin, as well as vitamin A, as well as vitamin E.
Mhm.
And so we really didn't have a lot of ideas except just to say, okay, let's try these blood tests. Which one was testosterone,
Okay.
one was my TSH, which I was always tested, one was one I never heard of, and one was prolactin.
Yeah, so hormone imbalance can be another main driver, which is why in about 2 months I'll start losing my hair. But so that's where you see a lot of women go through postnatal hair loss. So I would say micronutrient imbalance potentially. If you haven't had that looked at, I would, talk with your primary care provider about that, like vitamin D, iron, all your B vitamins.
Those are all good.
Are they? So then hormone imbalance, and then you mentioned that you eat a healthy diet. Low inflammatory diet can be really helpful, and then looking further into your specific gut microbiome. So
That is a problem.
okay,
And that
So
was
that
due
would
to,
be-
that was due to, the fact that I was on tetracycline twice a day for 9 years of my life, from the time I was 9 till I was 18.
okay.
And who thought back then
Yeah.
about that I needed probiotics? Who even heard of probiotics? Who was really eating yogurt if you lived in this country,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So yeah, I know I just messed up.
That is probably a contributing piece, I would say. Gut microbiome is the center of the immune system, truly.
Yeah, it's just what kind of probiotics to add. Do I need prebiotics?
Very
You know, that kind of-
personalized. There's testing you can do, but then also, you and I can talk. There's ways that I can recommend specific strains and potencies of bacteria just based on symptoms and health history.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So out of the plant-based proteins,
Yes.
what do you recommend? Because now I'm hearing that the lectins in like the pea proteins and that are not good. So I'm not really sure what to put in a smoothie.
That's a really good question. So depending on the person, and depending on your specific health history, most people can tolerate lectins in balance. So I know there is a lot of avoiding nightshades and all of that. You don't want pea protein to be what you're getting protein for 5 times a day. 1 time a day, it should be okay, as long as you don't have, autoimmune disease or anything like that. It's a bigger concern of getting variety. So if you are like a plant-based eater, getting a variety of beans and nuts and seeds and things like that. Pea protein, rice protein for plant-based, like protein shakes, are totally fine, in my opinion, as long as it's not a known trigger for you and it's not something that's making up so much of your diet. Again, as Americans, we tend to be like creatures of habit and all or nothing, and so we find something we like and we overdo it. And so a lot of recommendations come from that fact too, of like we overconsume soy protein and things like that too. So long story short, I'm okay with pea protein as long as it's not like a known specific trigger for you, if it's just happening like once a day.
As far as organic, do you just follow like the Dirty Dozen? I mean, grass-fed meat, what do you recommend for that?
Yes, so it totally depends on the person. Some people want to be going all organic everything, and in that case, great. It also depends where you're at with your health. So if I have someone who's like actively fighting cancer, we try to go organic everything that they can afford. For the typical standard person, I would say definitely going by the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. So Clean 15 are the foods you probably don't have to spend your money on. Going organic, Dirty Dozen, definitely you want to be spending your dollars on organic. And then if you consume meat and poultry, definitely getting grass-fed beef, organic ideally. And then eggs, poultry, and dairy also getting high-quality organic as best you can.
Is it like pasteurized eggs, is that what you're supposed to get?
Pardon me?
The pasteurized eggs, is that what
Yeah,
you recommend?
Ideally, I always like to even say if you have like a local, like somewhere you can actually buy it from the chickens that are laying them, ideally. Otherwise, yes, just definitely staying away from conventional white-shelled eggs at the grocery store, which is kind of a hard topic right now since they're expensive all around, but in my opinion, that is one that's worth it. And if you're really looking at price, two eggs offers as much protein, or is considered a serving of protein, much like 3-ish ounces of chicken. So until the price of 2 eggs gets up there, you really are getting a good bang for your buck, even when you're buying pasture-raised organic.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I've seen, you mentioned body composition, and I've seen scales that you can buy for home use that are supposedly doing all these measurements and that. And I'm kind of like, oh, should I go on or should I not get on? And it's like, is that just going to flood me with more numbers that I freak out about versus that one on the scale, which is, messes with all your heads. And I'm in fitness and stuff, and so I know it just messes with your heads. It's messed with my head for 50 years. And so the value of, seeing that information at your disposal or checking in on it once in a while.
So that is actually the really important part, like you just mentioned, once in a while. So if you do feel like you're someone that would overuse the scale at home, or if it would like get into your head in a negative way, I tend to recommend going somewhere and having that testing done and do it once a month or once a quarter if it's something that you don't need to be checking in on every day. If you have one of those scales at home, Omron or InBody are the brands I recommend. InBody would be way more expensive, it's like $350. Omron will have less expensive. She's telling us our time's up. And then just know that when it comes to that type of testing, your hydration status needs to be similar and consistent. So always first thing in the morning. Don't have alcohol or caffeine the night before, really, for ideal results.
Thank you.
Yeah. I will, without asking, take this out because I know we're over. Thank you all so much.
And our next presenter is going to be JoAnn, and she is from Stretch Zone in Glendale. So I will let her.
You get such a prop.
Thank
Should we
goodness
have
I
to-
was second.
Wait, Nina was talking about that bicep curl as I watched you holding
I know.
her that whole time. I was like, look at that isometric bicep that whole time.
You know what? I was taking this out afterwards. Sorry. Oh, yeah.
So,
Here.
no, I can, perfect. Thank you. Give me just 1 second.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. As she said, I am JoAnn Lay. My background, I am an occupational therapist. I've been an OT for 30 years. I'm 55. I'm at, like, when I realized, when I say that, it feels like, wow, my children aren't quite 30, so it makes it feel like a quite long time ago. I've worked in all different settings. I've worked in long-term care, I've worked in acute care. Really my biggest passion for most of my career was in outpatient orthopedics. And so that is the background and the lens through which I've seen things. Man, I super enjoyed both Nina and Amanda, and just the different, I get giddy and excited at the multitude of things that we have access to that can really help us live our best lives. So thank you for having me and inviting me. Random tidbit, my one of my business partners has worked with Heather, one of the PTs here in the past. So that was this connection. So it's amazing who we all know and how we get connected. So Stretch Zone itself, it is a franchise. It is actually out of Florida. Just a little bit about the Stretch Zone story itself. So Jordan Gold, the founder of the Stretch Zone method, background as an athletic trainer, worked in professional sports, actually had a lot of, I'm not a giant sports person, which Tony, my partner, chastises me about. He says I should be more knowledgeable in sports, but Barry Sanders, Jim Brown, a lot of these, big sports people. Jordan Gold was, kind of their personal stretcher. So he would go around and help these athletes, move and feel their best. He started to feel this angst in his heart of, I can't stretch the world. How do I make what I'm doing replicable, right? There should be more people that can do what I'm doing. And that really started to birth the entire, cascade of what is now Stretch Zone today. So lots of involvement with professional sports. It was very important to him that anyone that would be providing these services would be certified, and he was successful in obtaining that nationally recognized certification. Just in 2015, the first corporate location opened. We're going to talk a little bit more about the strapping system, but that became patented and effective today. I think just last week, the 272nd location nationwide of Stretch Zone has opened, so helping lots of people throughout the country. So why did we specifically get involved in Stretch Zone? So we know, coming from different backgrounds, Tony, an athletic trainer, Becky, a background, her education was in kinesiology with an emphasis in women's health. Becky had been diagnosed with MS in her early 40s, and just really all of us having a passion for knowing that people, Amanda, I loved her slide at the end, how we sometimes forget how good we're supposed to feel, right? And that we aren't just supposed to deal with pain. And so really when it comes down to a nutshell, our goal is to help people feel better and do more, right? I get this gift of this body that I get to do life with. I get this, one time to do life. I want to be able to, really feel my best and be able to do as much as possible. So here is the rest of our team. So there's my bestie, Becky. We've been best of friends for 20 plus years. Her husband, Tony, on the other side. And then Tyler is our regional general manager that helps us as part of the leadership team. So Becky and Tony had discovered Stretch Zone, having sold their previous business, yay them, they were able to be retired in their late 40s. But as I said, Becky with her MS diagnosis, they had gotten stretched down in Naples, Florida. They share time between Wisconsin and Florida. Becky immediately felt the benefits, on her own body from the effects of the MS. And at the time, there were no locations in Wisconsin. I mean, very condensed version of the story. They reached out to me, hey, we want to do this thing. We really think Wisconsin needs this. Do you want to do this with us? And absolutely. So what do we do? So Stretch Zone is either an adjunct with or following traditional therapy programs, having worked in the traditional healthcare realm for a long time. Certainly, everybody tells people, you need to stretch, right? I mean, people aren't really good at it. There wouldn't be a business that helps people stretch if everyone was really good at it on their own. But a lot of people, I have discomfort. I would love to walk more, be more active, exercise, but I feel tight. I can't move. I have discomfort. For athletes, injury prevention, optimal performance, really everybody, who just might say, well, I just don't feel as good as I used to or as good as I want to. So not sure where I live in Waukesha myself, but our 6 studios are in Brookfield, Delafield, Glendale on the west side of Madison, in Menominee Falls, and down in Oak Creek. So what we provide is a passive stretching technique. We're going to talk shortly about the various kinds of stretching. But what we do is a passive stretching technique. I tease our clients all the time, right? I wish all of life was that hard. I could go in, lay down, someone moves my body, and I walk out feeling better, right? I mean, very unlike, other avenues. So. So I'm going to talk a little bit about when we are actually performing the stretches. So the specific techniques that we use, I would tell clients, it is on a 1 to 10 stretch scale. If 1 is where I barely feel anything, 10 is where you would want us to let go. We never get anywhere near a 10. We always perform the stretching, and it's always directed by the client. The client, we are working in tandem to direct the extent to which the stretches are performed. Those would be done at a 3, meaning a light stretch. A 5 is a medium, comfortable stretch. And a 7 is a good deep stretch, but even at that 7, there should never be any discomfort. We also do some stretches that we would describe as feel-good stretches, but ultimately our goal is always to target the individual needs and goals, right? Reality is we all have the same muscles, right? Everyone in this room, we all have the same muscles, but yours and mine are probably just not tight in the same patterns. And so though we, as a franchise, there's specific protocols, there's specific stretches and techniques that we do, the stretches that we are doing for anyone's individual session are always tailored specifically to their patterns of tightness and limitation. So what is flexibility, right? I mean, so often we'll have people say to us, and forever in my work as an OT, I've always been tight. I just was born with short muscles, whatever that people may say. And so when I brought props. I brought a slinky. I do find it super fun that I remember as a little girl at my cousin's house, watching if we could get the slinky to go all the way down the stairs, doing the top over bottom. And now that's one of our, visuals that we use in our business, which I just love. Okay. So really what we're doing, I want you to think of, right, because we don't actually stretch muscles, right? So here's, a little bit of that anatomy, right? So let's say, for instance, hamstrings. We so often hear people say, I have tight hamstrings, or my hamstrings are short. So my hamstrings run from the posterior aspect of my pelvis down to, behind my knee on that posterior aspect of my leg. My hamstring is the length it is, right? When people say, I feel tight or I'm inflexible, what's happening is when I go down to try to touch my toe, right, nerve endings inside that muscle belly fly an impulse up my spine to my brain and back down again that would say, whoa, don't go any further, okay? So what we're actually doing through the stretch zone method, so right, if this is, right, just like my slinky, ultimately it is the length it is, right? It just may be sitting shorter or longer, right? So what we're doing through the 3, 5, 7 and the progressive stretching is helping reprogram that neuromuscular system to help that whole system understand, hey, that muscle could be here, it could be here, it could be here, right? When people say, I feel tight, you didn't get that way overnight, right? I mean, I think it's some of those, you know, when we're kids and we're running around and we're, you know, playing and getting all kinds of crazy positions and, well, hopefully, I know kids are on their electronics, right, too much nowadays. Hopefully they're still crawling around on the floor and pretending to be animals and doing all of those things. And then as we get older, whether we have a more sedentary lifestyle, if I'm not moving in those same ways anymore, that's where I start to lose some of that flexibility and mobility. And we're helping reprogram that. So different kinds of stretching. There we go. Okay, so passive. So there's passive stretching, there is active stretching. So different types of active stretching, yoga, different things. Those are all wonderful, great avenues where people can be helping also improve their flexibility. Static stretching. I have found, and I found a lot even in my work as an OT, is that, right, so people say, oh, I understand I'm supposed to stretch, you know, I understand that that's good. So they're like, okay, all bound and determined, you know, I'm gonna stretch. Well, they go at it so fast and furious and so hard, they create inflammation, they create soreness, and they say, okay, I tried stretching, never doing that again, it didn't work, right? So there's different ways, you know, similar to when we were talking about the hydration and that gradual increase in water intake versus, okay, Amanda told me I should drink more water, right? That doesn't mean we're all gonna go home tomorrow and start guzzling. There's also PNF stretching, which I utilized as well clinically, and I think, you know, most therapists too are familiar with that, where, you know, we have agonist and antagonistic muscle groups, and so PNF is a specific technique to help with that. So short-term effects of stretching. So people get off the table, they often say, yep, I can tell I feel a little bit better, you know, with some of the posture things that we've talked about, right? If people are doing a lot of sitting, it's all well and good to tell people. I mean, I was a posture ninja as an OT. I still comment to people about their posture, right? There's a way our bodies are supposed to be aligned. But if I have things pulling me down, I do have those tight pecs, I have the tight hip flexors, I can encourage someone to stand tall, but if there's reasons that they can't, sorry, I must have this running on, it's, if there's reasons that they can't stand up tall, we help facilitate that process so that they can help improve that posture. Longer term effects. So there would be the, you know, the diagram of what we talked about with the hamstring, right? The nerve endings within the muscle belly connecting to that nervous system, and as that neuromuscular system gets retrained, you know, balance improvements. Some of our 80-some-year-old clients, I can think of Jerry at our Brookfield studio, who, you know, and I love asking our clients, what do you notice the most about, you know, what you've seen different? He's like, I can shower better and get dressed without feeling like I'm losing my balance. So just, it's those, you know, one of the analogies I love to use is, if our body is like a circus tent, right? If I pitch a circus tent and there's all these ropes holding the tent up, if several of them are tighter or more limited, that tent is never gonna stand properly until someone takes care of making sure the ropes are all the proper length. And that is what stretching can help people achieve. So who's appropriate for this, right? Everybody could stand to have better flexibility, mobility, whether it is the athlete, where we're helping with injury prevention. I'm a runner, I'm a weekend golfer, but all week I sit behind a desk for, behind that computer screen for 50 hours a week, and I wonder why my golf swing isn't as good as I want it to be. People who either are in an exercise program or looking to start an exercise program. As an adjunct, we hear people who say, gosh, I've lost weight since I've been coming here. We don't do anything specifically and directly with weight loss, but it's just, I have less discomfort. That project in the basement and all those boxes I swore I was gonna be cleaning up, and every day after work I think, I just wanna sit on the couch. Right? People start feeling better. They're more likely to take a walk, go for a hike, play with their kids outside, do different things. So in conjunction as a side benefit, we hear a lot of individuals say how they have experienced weight loss. And really anyone, not just the athlete, but people who I have chronic back pain. I don't sleep well. I wake up every day. It's just plain old hard to, cross my ankle over my knee to pull my socks and shoes on in the morning because my hips are so tight and they're hurting. So really just anyone who, again, would like to feel better and do more. One of the, besides the weight loss comments or the different things that we've heard that way too, would be some of the emotional and psychological benefits of when we just feel our best, right? Amanda commented on that, right? I mean, even the impact that the incontinence would have on just our daily routine. I can think of a woman in particular who, I've often told people, right, I think sometimes we compartmentalize ourselves of like, well, here's my physical self and here's my, emotional self and here's my, spiritual self. But reality is we're all those things all at once at the same time, right? How I'm physically feeling, am I a little bit less patient with my children, with my spouse? Am I a more distracted employee because I'm experiencing low back pain, right? How that ripple effect of how my physical body impacts other aspects of my life. And I can think specifically of a woman who started coming to us last fall, probably her husband, a avid runner, marathoner, just super physically fit guy. She's a teacher, a lot of low back, hip pain, and it was really starting to affect their marriage because she would get home from work and her husband would say, let's go for a walk, let's at least go do something, and she wanted nothing to do with any of that. And how she, as she started to move better, they would go for walks. She's like, this literally feels like this has helped my marriage because now we are able to connect that way again. So we also see people with chronic health issues, as I mentioned, Becky with her MS diagnosis. We have several amputees at one of our studios, different gait patterns because of the prosthesis, fibromyalgia, chronic back pain. So really anyone that's experiencing any of those things. So as far as what the stretch sessions are like, just to explain a little bit more, and I'm going to show you, just see. So people come in, they lay on our tables with that patented strapping system that we talked about. The rationale for the straps, right? Yoga, let's take for instance. If I have patterns of tightness and I'm doing various yoga poses, positions, I may flow into an area of tightness or compensate. So what these straps allow us to do is to stabilize the body, like in this instance, the pelvis is stabilized, the contralateral leg is stabilized, to give a more effective, in this case, IT band stretch. Or here, for a glute stretch, being able to achieve deeper range of motion because someone else is helping you, but then again, the client is always directing the extent of that stretch. So it's kind of like that training room environment, several tables, anywhere from 4 to 6 tables in each of our studios. The stretch practitioners would make notes on the specific stretches that were done, what's recommended for the next session. Some of the testimonials, I mean, I've already shared with you, you know, some of those stories. I think that's probably, you know, on a day like today when, you know, I worked at home a chunk of the day and then got to come here and see all of you, the opportunities that I have to be in studio working with people, just the difference that it's making in people's lives, and again, across the age span. You know, I love this one that Carolyn is now, so it's something her and her 83-year-old mama are doing together. That is a little bit about us, but I do have a little gift for everybody. So here's how I look at things. Right, our bodies are a gift, right? You get one to do as many years as you're given in life, right? And so how I take care of that, right? I don't get a new one. I mean, really, it is a gift. So if you are so inclined, I brought cute little bows. And so what I would love for you to do is put this somewhere where you'll see it. I mean, whether it's on your bathroom mirror, your rear view mirror of your car, on your computer, somewhere where you would see as an encouragement and reminder, right, with all the avenues that we talked about tonight, whether that's, right, as women with, I learned things about my bladder, thank you very much, Nina, you know, and I might get 2 headaches a week, and I'm like, I need to think about that. But just as a prompt and reminder of, there is so much available, you know, for us to access, and how we take care of the gift. So, if you would like, I would love you to have a bow. I can just kind of pass that around, but put it somewhere where you see it, where you remember, you know, and to take care of the gift that is you, okay? Any questions? Yes?
How frequently are people, I mean, I know everyone's different, but is it like one session a week, one session every couple weeks?
Yeah,
How often?
Thank you. Yes, our clients come in, it's 1 to 3 times per week. They're half-hour sessions. It's designed as a 3-month program initially. I'll just hand this over and you can keep passing. So initially a 3-month program that our clients sign up for. And so some people, right, maybe they've had, you know, I'm training for a marathon, I have a goal that I'm trying to achieve. You know, this is gonna help me, you know, achieve that. We know nationwide, I mean, gosh, our first studio in Menominee Falls opened last June. We have clients who have said, this is just, I come in twice a week, this is just what helps me do the rest of my life well. I can do my exercise program, you know, I'm more active, all of my, you know, discomfort is managed. So, you know, some people will renew and do another 3-month program and continue to come in, but then that's just individualized to what they would want.
If you're doing like a 3-month, is that exclusively to be used at a particular studio or group of studios, or could
Okay,
you,
so because
like,
we
you're
own
in
all
Florida
6
for a
studios.
month,
Oh, yeah. Because as a franchise, so
Yeah.
you can utilize that program at any of our 6
Okay.
studios, but if you would, you know, like say if you're a snowbird, right, like Becky and Tony, they spend half their time in Florida and half here, you can either freeze your program if you're going to be gone. Within our 6 studios, that program can be utilized, but not at another, if it's owned by another franchisee.
The people who are actually doing the stretching on you, what is their training?
All of the backgrounds, so besides being certified, okay, various backgrounds. Some of our staff are athletic trainers, we have a couple of PT assistants, massage therapists, people with kinesiology or exercise physiology, exercise science degrees. So it varies, but across the board, they all have a background in anatomy and physiology, specifically musculoskeletal anatomy, and then have to go through the training, test out and pass before they can ever put hands on a client. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.